Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest indeed that I have wanted on this show for some time. Finally got him. Although that son of a bitch, Tucker Carlson, got him first. His name is John Gibson, formerly of Tripwire Interactive. John, it's thrilling for me to talk to you. I've really wanted to speak to you for a while. How are you, my friend? Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate you having me on your show here, Colin. I'm doing okay. It's been a challenging time, but certainly a challenging past year. But I'm doing all right. Is the quick answer.
Good. So we have a lot to talk about, and I want to catch everyone up on why I wanted to have you on the show. I want to talk about the past, the present, and the future for you as well. But just to catch everyone up, because we did discuss this on Sacred Symbols, as people know, we try to stay apolitical on the show, except for when things intersect with the games industry. That way we're not endorsing candidates, we're not endorsing political parties, none of that. But when things that are political, socioeconomic, whatever, interact with the games industry, we like to talk about them. We take a very hard stance against China. We take a very hard stance against Saudi Arabia with the SNK stuff and so on and so forth. So this intersects with politics and game, or the intersection here with politics and games is a little bit different in that this story intersects the pro-life, pro-choice saga that's been going on for time immemorial with the games industry. So I wanted to just throw that all out there. I'm going to let you tell your own story to the audience, but I want to describe you as you describe yourself on LinkedIn right now, which I think is awesome. Full-time philanthropist, continuing helping the poor and underprivileged of the world, including orphans and widows, which is awesome. So you are a philanthropist. Congratulations on that. I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
But Mr. Gibson, tell us a little bit about yourself from the top level, and then we'll get into what happened to you, and then we'll begin to dissect that.
So how deep do you want me to go? Do you want me to talk about history? Do you want to talk about?
Let's start with history. Tell me about yourself. And sure. There are no time limits on this show. So I mean, I'm going to be respectful of your time, but you can go on and tell us whatever you'd like.
Okay. So I'll give you the 50,000 foot view. My first career was a professional musician. I was actually led and played in a Christian metal band for about 10 years, a couple of different bands. One band had a record deal, got to tour in North America, had a really good time, never got rich and famous, got a tiny bit famous, but the best thing that came out of that was meeting my now wife of 26 years at one of our concerts. The first time I met a lady that was into the same music that I was, that also wasn't crazy. I had to marry her.
Fair enough.
and then from there, I sort of transitioned into doing music for mods and amateur games. And I was working on a mod that the only programmer, a small team, about 5 people. This is around 2000, and we had the mod 75% done, and the only programmer on the team quit. So I had gone back to school for computer programming. I dropped out when my music career took off, and so I had a decent amount of programming experience. Started programming and discovered I felt like a fish in water. I absolutely loved it. I was a way better programmer than even a musician, and just, said, this is my calling in life. This is what should have been doing my whole life. So kept working on amateur games, and eventually, got on the Red Orchestra mod team. We created a mod, from about 2003 to 2005 that got very popular. It was a World War II mod for Unreal Tournament 2003 and later Unreal Tournament 2004. And I was the lead programmer on that team, and also eventually led the mod group. That intersected with a competition that Epic Games, who later made Gears of War and Fortnite, at the time their popular game was Unreal Tournament. They had a contest called the $1 million Make Something Unreal contest. And their goal was to find the best mod for Unreal Tournament in the world. The contest lasted 18 months. 1,000 teams from all over the world entered. Grand prize was 50,000 US dollars and engine licenses for the Unreal game engine worth $1 million. Long story short, our mod team won. And it was exhilarating after 18 months of hard work. A couple of people, myself and one of the guys that would later go on to co-found Tripwire with me, we had left our jobs and we were working 100 plus hours a week for months to try to win this mod contest because we just dreamed about making games for a living. So we won. We started Tripwire Interactive in the spring of 2005, along with a couple of other members of the mod team. And we got to making a commercial game out of Red Orchestra. We released it in early 2006. We had lots of challenging ups and downs. One of the most difficult parts of that transition is, as a mod maker, since you're doing it not as your day job, you don't really have to make money off of it. Part of what you do is you keep putting out updates for your mod for free over and over again, and that's how you kind of build the popularity of your mod. And when Red Orchestra first came out as a commercial product, we did that. We spent most of our profits just giving away free updates, which really built up a loyal fan base, but also almost put us out of business. So lots of challenges in those early days. One of the things that I had to do personally, and the other co-owners weren't in a position to be able to do this, is I would have to borrow money against all of my personal belongings, which when we first started, I didn't have anything anyway. But as time went along and we started doing a little better, I had a house, I had a car, had a TV, which I didn't have those things when we first started. And I would have to borrow money to make payroll against everything that I owned. So if an update failed or one of our games failed, not only would the company be out of business, I would be homeless, carless, on the street with nothing to show for it. So, but we made it through many of those ups and downs. 2009, Killing Floor comes out, and that game just was a world changer for us. We developed the game on a budget of about $150,000, which is nothing. I mean, your middle of the road games these days cost $20 or $30 million to make. And
I saw that 505, and now, I know that Remedy had said that they made Control for $30 million, which I thought was insane. And then when they announced the new budget, it was only $50 million. And I was like, wow, how are you going to do that? For those, that's incredible, especially because you're working on, Unreal 2.x, I guess, and then you move on to Unreal 3 later. So that's hard. That's not a lot of money. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was very little money, but then the game came out and sold 6 million copies.
Awesome.
And
love it.
That was once again another life-changing experience. And after that, up until that point, we had funded the games all ourselves with what little money we could beg, borrow, and scrape together. But we were still actually looking for publishing money until we never got it, but we would look for it. And
even after Killing Floor sold all that, no one wanted to work with you guys?
Before Killing Floor came out.
I see. Okay.
Even after the successful launch of Red Orchestra.
Right.
It's not that nobody wanted to work with us. It's that we couldn't find a deal that we wanted. Every person that we would talk to, every publisher we talked to would say, we're going to give you funded 90% of the game. We're going to fund the last 10%. We're going to take the IP. We're going to make you turn the game into something that you don't want. And you'll probably never see any money later.
Yeah. Sounds great.
That's a great deal, right?
Yeah. Sounds awesome.
No, that's not a great deal. And but after Killing Floor came out and was successful, we're just like, screw all those guys. We got our own money. We're gonna make whatever game we want.
Perfect.
And which we had been doing before, but at this point we could make whatever game we wanted with a decent budget. And so went on. I'll fast forward through the rest of the history, but just continued to build the company up from there. And Red Orchestra 1, we had 4 full-time employees. Killing Floor, we had 11. Red Orchestra 2, 25. Killing Floor 2, 40-something. And then by the time I left, 120, 125 people.
Yeah, that's a lot, man. I own nothing like yours, but I co-own an indie dev, and we only have 2 full-time employees and a cacophony of freelancers because we can't afford that kind of overhead, and I have to probably lend money to the company soon, next year for us to get to our next game or whatever as well. So I feel you. I feel like I see echoes in your own experience that are so interesting that I really want to pull at it. I've been diligently writing notes as you've been writing. Just as an aside, this has nothing to do with anything. What is it about conservative men and metal I just want to ask you that, because you did Christian metal. I've always found it interesting that I've come to like bands in my life where I wasn't even aware they were Christian. Like a good example, a bigger example would be like POD. I had no idea those guys were Christian rock band when I bought Southtown or whatever the hell that record was when I was in high school. But I'm curious, what do you think about, why do you think that those two genres seem to go to, or that genre of music and Christianity go together so well?
Well, first off, let me say it's awesome that you liked POD, because I was friends with the singer of POD back in the day. We played some shows together. As a matter of fact,
Sonny, right? That's his name.
Sonny Sandoval.
Right. That's so cool.
And as a matter of fact, the record label that eventually signed us put out a compilation disc we were on there with POD as well. But why is that?
Blindside's another example of a band like that I loved later on. I had no idea we're Christian. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no worries. So I don't know for sure. If I had to theorize, and some of your listeners may not agree with this, but I feel like Christianity is one of the ultimate forms of rebellion. You're certainly doing something very different than what most of the world tells you should be doing. And metal is also one of the ultimate forms of rebellion. So for me, I feel like I've always wanted to be that, not rebelling for no reason, but certainly thinking outside the box, going against the flow kind of person. And I think that permeated everything going, Tripwire. It was like, we're getting crappy publishing deal offers and all these things. Like, hell no, we're not going to take that.
Yeah.
We're going to do it our own way.
Yeah. I'm glad that I was able to ask you that question, because I've always been fascinated by that, about the seeming dissonance between those two things, and yet how they come together. And I think that happens in many other things as well. But I just wanted to ask you that. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about. By the way, what instrument did you play? I was curious about that.
Guitar and vocals.
Guitar and vocals, cool.
And I actually did some of the music for Killing Floor 1 and one song on the Killing Floor 2 soundtrack as well.
Awesome. That's really cool. I had, as a console person, Tripwire had only really crossed my desk after I had left IGN. I mean, I was in charge of IGN's PlayStation coverage for years, and you would have probably been dealing with my friends like Dan Adams and Charles Oniet and Steve Butts and those guys, because I didn't deal with any of the PC stuff. But it wasn't until Killing Floor 2 came out in 2016, which came to PS4, that I became familiar with you guys. And then actually, and I just need to say this, when Maneater was on PS Plus around the time PS5 launched, I downloaded, loved, and platinumed that game and thought it was fucking phenomenal. I need to say that right off the bat. I thought Maneater ruled. I thought that game was awesome. Loved it. Knew exactly what it was. It was clever and interesting. Nice job on that one.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Maneater was a game that it was led internally by one of our co-owners named Bill Monk, and then also I worked on it a lot as well. I did the first pass of the script for the game, and worked on a lot of the high-level design elements for the game. So I'm glad to hear that you liked it. It's funny because it's one of those games that some people really got, and then some people didn't. Some reviewers didn't get it, but players did, and it sold really well. And it's just one of those things that I think somehow, we wanted it certainly to have some depth to it and be fun, but we didn't set out to make a 200-hour epic about playing as a shark. We set out to make a 10 or 15-hour game that was really, really fun for a short amount of time, and was just completely different than anything that was out there. Yeah,
that's the thing, and that's why I recommended it so highly on Sacred back in the day, because I challenged the listeners to what. This is very different. We always talk about we're even talking about how PlayStation games themselves are merging together into one. I'm playing God of War Ragnarok now, and I'm a little bored by it. I got to be perfectly honest with you, which our audience is so aghast and mad at me about. But even those things are merging together. So playing something like Maneater, again, nothing to do with our conversation, but needed to compliment you on that, because I love open world games. I love checkbox games. And I don't mean that as an insult. I love those games. And I felt like it's a very memorable game from that early PS5 period when, frankly, there just wasn't that much to play. So for me, even though I knew it came out before that. All right. So we've established who you are. We've established a little bit about Tripwire. We've established your Christian bona fides as well, which I think are important. Now I want to ask you about and catch everyone up to why I wanted to have you on the show, which is what happened to you. And I was watching as I mentioned earlier, you were on Tucker Carlson's show on Fox Nation. And I watched clips of that and read some transcripts of it and some reporting on it. And I thought the reporting on it was weird. And I think you did too. So I want to ask you about that. But on there, you had finally spoken about something that I had emailed you about, and I'm sure many other people wanted to talk to you about for a long time, which was what happened to you, because I feel like there's a parallel, though fleeting, and I don't know how much you know about my own story, but I dealt with a cancellation in quotes too from people that I loved and trusted for different reasons, and estranged me from them, and I had to go on and do my own thing, which I've been doing for years now, to great success, thankfully. So I feel like I wanted to dig deeper into what happened to you and just discover and learn more about it. And I think our audience will find some sympathetic stuff to learn, and at least they'll learn about your story. But I think you'll find a lot of sympathy with our audience because they might have known a parallel to a story quite like this. And so you tweeted the following last year. Quote, proud of U.S. Supreme Court affirming the Texas law banning abortions for babies with a heartbeat. As an entertainer, I don't get political often, yet with so many vocal peers on the other side of this issue, I felt it was important to go on the record as a pro-life game developer. That's it. That was what you said.
Right.
And this caused and I remember it because we covered it on the show, a furor that really blindsided me and caught me off guard, because I couldn't believe the viciousness and rapidity of it, to the point where I couldn't even really keep up. It was almost like 3 days or not even, and it was just over. Tell me about that. What happened here? Tell me about that tweet, this time period, and what your intent was sending it. And obviously you must have been earnestly surprised by the reaction to it, which I think people take for granted, because otherwise why would you have said it, right? Whether you believe it or not, of course you didn't want you didn't want to have a problem with your company and all of this. So tell me a little bit about this time. This is getting into the meat of the matter.
Absolutely. And there's probably 10 questions there, so you'll have to remind me.
Just go. I'm sorry. Just go, please.
No worries. So, So first I'll start with what was I thinking?
Yes.
And what I was thinking was right there in the tweet. It was that, and well, there's some layers there, but as a conservative game developer, very often whenever something political happens in the world, what I would see is the liberal game developers just shouting from the rooftops about their feelings and what I'm angry about this, or I'm upset about that, or I support X, Y, and Z. And what I would never see is any conservative game developers coming out and saying that they felt something different. And this topic is something that's been near and dear to my heart my whole life. My mother was given up for adoption in the 1950s by a 15-year-old girl that had gotten pregnant. And my mother told me from the time I was very young just how thankful she was that her mother didn't abort her. And my mother wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be here, and my sisters wouldn't be here, and my kids wouldn't be here had that mother in 1957 or 58, who was 15 years old, made a different decision. So it's always been near and dear to my heart. And I thought, this is one time I'm really going to stand up and just say something. And did I expect it to blow up? Absolutely not. I had occasionally made some political comments, especially on Twitter. Around 2016, I said some things about my disapproval of Hillary Clinton. earlier this year. One of the areas of the world that I'm quite passionate about is what the people of Cuba go through, living under their communist dictatorship, and seeing what was happening there. It was actually late last year or middle of last year when there were riots in the streets over wanting free speech, and I was very out there in my support for the people of Cuba. And then even last year as well, coming out, which is not something that conservatives usually would do, but coming out in support of racial justice and police reform, not defund the police, but change their policies so that they're more balanced and more caring. And actually, I lost some friends on the right over some of that. But anytime I had come out with any of those things, I'd get 3 or 4 thumbs up and 3 or 4 thumbs down. I had 3,000 Twitter followers. Being the CEO of a video game studio is like being the executive producer of your favorite movie. It's like, who's the executive producer for the Avengers? Like, right. Nobody knows.
Right. vital, but doing work to facilitate, not doing work to be in front. Yeah.
You're oftentimes behind the scenes. So right. I didn't have much of a following. I didn't for a million years think that it was going to blow up into this international news story and furor and end up being the second highest trending thing on Twitter, right below U.S. pulls out of Afghanistan. When you think about geopolitics and the history of the world, 100 years from now, they will probably be reporting in history books, taught in school, and then the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan. They will not be reporting John Gibson tweeted about pro-life.
Right.
And I've even had friends tell me, even friends with similar political viewpoints, tell me, "What, were you stupid? How could you not know?" But I really had no idea. I knew that people on both sides felt very strong about this, but I had no idea it was going to blow up into the thing that it was.
Yeah, it's I couldn't believe it. In fact, I went to read about it when I was preparing my notes, and I could. It's hard to remember, and being reminded of it, that was it. That was the tweet. And this is what I keep telling people about. Not to draw in another controversial thing, but we talk about J.K. Rowling a lot on the show because of Hogwarts Legacy and all the drama around that. And I'm like, she didn't say anything offensive. She really didn't. Like in fact, I think at one of the major legacy media outlets recently did a deep dive to go and find J.K. Rowling's transphobia and came and wrote how she couldn't. And people got really upset about that, but it was like supposed to be this honest research on that. And so I was like, is there anything else? I even searched on Twitter for your name and abortion, your name and pro-choice or pro-life, just seeing if anything ever came up. And I'm like, this is literally it. And the reason I say this is it is because I don't think that, and this is what you and I were talking about over email a little bit, is I don't think this is a radical position. I'm not afraid of saying what I feel and what I mean. I've long inoculated myself from consequences for that, except from the audience. And so they know how I feel. And I have really scattered political beliefs, although I consider myself right wing. And I think that they know that. But I'm actually pro-choice. The thing that I think is important is that I came from a Catholic family, very devoutly Catholic family, where pro-life is the rule. And I don't find it this offensive point of view. I find it the ideal. However, as I said in my email to you, and I'm going to let you elaborate, I'm pro-choice to a degree, maybe a European or even pre-European, like 10 to 12 weeks, just to give people an option or a way out to meet reality. And it's not always going to be the butterfly effect of positivity like yours with your mom having the child, 15 years old and all the rest. And so I guess I was most taken aback because I was like, what is so offensive about someone saying that they believe in the sanctity of life? That is the ideal. We can talk about why it's not possible or why it's unlikely or why it's not going to be achieved. But how do you feel about hearing that? Because I think a lot of people agree with me that regardless of how we feel about life, that what you said wasn't out of bounds and is in fact shared by a lot of people. And if you spread out and you went to all countries in the world, I would argue you're looking at maybe half of the planet agreeing with what you said. And so I just don't see how you could attack someone so vociferously over taking a mainstream, life-driven, religious-driven stance like that. I don't know. I know people say that it doesn't matter because, you know, reality trumps the ideal, but I still think that we should talk about the ideal.
Yeah, it is. It is a mainstream viewpoint. One of the things that I did after it went down, I was like, I wonder where people in America are on this point. And there were some reputable polling out there that said 46% of Americans supported the Texas heartbeat law, 43% opposed it, and the rest were undecided. So this was the majority of Americans agreeing with what they had decided in Texas and what the Supreme Court had decided. So yes, it was a mainstream position, but there's some issues here that maybe I can unpack as I think about this.
Please.
One of the things that the place that we've gotten in society is, I believe, and maybe I'm going to get a little philosophical here, but language is being used particularly by liberal people to assist them in getting their political viewpoints out there and changing public opinion. You know, if I say to you, you shouldn't hate somebody, you would go, yeah, you're right. You probably shouldn't hate somebody. But then if I redefine what hate is, if I turn hate into, I disagree with your position, oh, you hate me. Well, everybody thinks hate is wrong. Not everybody, but in general, people think hate is wrong. And in my case, it was rebranded not, John Gibson is pro-life, or John Gibson doesn't believe, is not pro-choice. What it got rebranded is literally, and there was an article. Am I allowed to name names of websites?
No, you can say whatever you want on the show.
There was a Kotaku article, headline: Tripwire boss or Killing Floor boss, aka the guy that runs Tripwire, me, thinks that women shouldn't have basic human rights. And that's what it was rebranded.
It's the Kathy Newman to Jordan Peterson thing, where you're reestablishing what someone says and then saying it back to them and challenging them on something they never even said or feel. Yeah.
It's this is what you said. This is what we're turning what you said into. And then if I read a headline about somebody else and they say, Billy Bob thinks people shouldn't have basic human rights, I'm going to be, oh, that's terrible. This person they should think people should have basic human rights. And people just look at the headlines often and don't dig a layer deeper. And of course, I support everyone's basic human rights and women. As a matter of fact, as a CEO and as a father of two girls, and someone who grew up with a single mother and two sisters, who has pretty much been surrounded by women my whole life with no brothers or anything, it's always been important to me that women have the same rights and the capabilities in the workplace. In Tripwire, I had 3 C-suite executives that reported to me. 2 of them were women. And I had either recruited or promoted into those positions. And I didn't promote them into the positions because they were women. I promoted them because they were qualified. But I always thought it was great that we had that diversity on our board. As a game developer, it was very important for me that women were portrayed well in our games. And let me describe that. There were times, and I don't know if you ever covered this on your show, but there's the female characters that women want to play as, and there's the female characters that guys want to see. And game artists tend to want to go for what guys want to see. And we had an artist that would keep developing characters for the original Killing Floor. And it's like, here's the slutty teenager. Here's the slutty grandma. Here's the slutty whatever. And it was like, why is every woman you create slutty? Like, can't we just not have,
Very Freudian.
we don't have, here's the slutty male character, here's the slutty grandpa. Like, why,
Yeah, it's
so
true.
I implemented, worked with the team to create a policy that with the female character designs, they would go through the female employees and they would get a chance to make comments and make changes. And we really shifted away from trying to make female characters that guys just wanted to look at to female characters that ladies wanted to play as. It was also very important to me in the language of our games. We implemented a policy, and I could sum it up. It's difficult to describe in general, but I sum it up as no sexual derogatory remarks. In other words, we're not saying terrible things about women in our games. And all of these things were very important anytime throughout the history of the company, anytime, because in the video games industry, there are way more guys than women. So when women would come into Tripwire, one of the things I would tell them every single time, I said, listen, the zero tolerance policy for sexual harassment, for bigotry against women, any of that stuff. So if you have any issues with that and you're not getting movement with HR, come straight to me, because we won't tolerate that. As someone, like I said, father of two young daughters, I wanted Tripwire to be a place that my daughters could work at and succeed and feel comfortable. So this story then it got repeated over and over again by the worldwide press, that somehow I was a woman hater and didn't think women should have basic human rights. It was just patently false and a rebranding of my actual position. And I think it was, as you've probably heard me describe, as social terrorism.
Right. I was going to ask you about this term shortly. I have this written down because I saw you were talking about this specifically on Varney and Co. Although I know you talked about it on Tucker as well, and I want to ask you more about that. I just want to say that it's unfortunate that we live in an era, like an Orwellian style era, where not for the first time, but again, words mean more than actions, because your actions are great. It's like people can be dismembered by the interpretation of someone's intent, the interpretation of someone's words, and the actions don't mean anything. And I think that that's shitty, and you were victimized by that, no doubt. And I also feel like I wanted to ask you quickly just about, because you had brought up the sex and all of that. And one of the things we do talk about on our show, although I don't know that my co-hosts really agree with me, is that I'm prudish, hardcore. The older I get, the more prude I become. I think I'm sick of violence. I'm sick of sex and all of that, just for those things' sake. I know your game, that big game is called Killing Floor. I know it's a shooter and all these kinds of things, but how do you feel about our society's our society has a problem, or the power brokers in our society have a problem with someone coming out in an affirmation of life, for example, but they don't come out against the hypersexualization of society, of children, of teenagers, or any of these things that I feel like are actually corrupting agents to the next generation, as opposed to the ideal, again, which I think that is. How do you feel about that, just as both a man, a Christian man, whatever?
Well, I think that it's unfortunate that that the protection of young people, the protection of women has been distorted in modern society. It used to be, we cared about people. We cared about young women. We cared about young children. And in society now, we pay a lot of lip service to it, but in reality, we're not doing enough. And I think that's unfortunate. And especially when let me describe it as this. And once again, I understand your listeners may have a very different viewpoint than I have. You may have a different viewpoint than me, but understanding that my care for the unborn just flows out of caring for children and human life. And I think that people on both sides of the spectrum, they care in a different way on this topic. They care about women that are poor or are very young when they get pregnant, and I do too. And so in that group, we both care in different ways, and I think we ought to be able to say that. I think one side should say I care in this way, and the other side should say I care in that way, and neither of us fear losing our jobs and our livelihoods. Now, outside of that group of people that care, though, on the left and the right, there's people that just don't care at all or don't care enough. And I think that that's unfortunate because some of the things happening, the Balenciaga thing that came out recently with
that was incredible. I actually couldn't even believe that incredible that went through.
And a lot of people, a lot of people probably look at that and think, what's the big deal? But it is, a bondage bear being held by a kid. No. If that had come out 50 years ago, Balenciaga would be, there'd be congressional investigations into Balenciaga, and now it's sort of like, they shouldn't do that. And yeah, there's some uproar, but even some celebrities are saying, I'm going to rethink my relationship. That's code words for I'm making a lot of money off of this, so I want to distance myself now, and then when the heat dies down, I'll kind of just secretly keep taking money from them.
Right.
And I think that's terrible.
I agree. And I'm glad you brought that situation up because it really does show a grand kind of ignorance of just what is actually happening. Like when I saw that, and I think a lot of that information actually just came from a random Twitter user that just zoomed in on some of those pictures of the Supreme Court cases that were underneath some of the pictures and all of this and figured it all out. I'm like, this is so deep and sinister. It's like a fucking it's like a Dan Brown novel, how deep it is. It's like it's perverse. And one thing I wanted to say, and I think it's important to say this, is, and this goes more into the pro-life or pro-choice argument per se, but people talk about how, well, you don't care about women when you're pro-life. And it's like, okay, that's your argument. You're entitled to that argument. But what about the baby? That's always been my thing. And the harsh reality, the almost, I'm not atheist, but the almost atheistic Sam Harris, like complete truth of the matter, as it were, was you're going to have to, in my opinion, we're going to have to make a decision about where in the middle we're going to meet on this. Because eventually that does turn into a viable baby. Maybe it's not always the best for that baby to be born in that situation. Maybe you have the right to eliminate that baby, but you are doing that. It's not like you're just doing it to nothing. You are making that decision. And I think I've said this on the show in the past, but I'm happy to put myself out there. I think my personal nature is what makes one of the things that makes this show go. I was a party to an abortion, and it was horrifying. Completely fucked from stem to stern. And it's something that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Do I think we made the right decision for us and for the yeah, I do. I do think that. But it was a heavy situation for me. It was a heavy situation for her. And it's not something to be taken lightly. And that's the thing that I think bothers me about the conversation. Not that people want to have abortions, not that there's a difference of opinions, but just how we speak about it with such a looseness. And it's not, I'm just telling you, it's really, maybe it's just based on your conscience or something. I don't know, but I'll never forget it. And I wish that I never found myself to be in that position. And then there would be people like you or more pro-life people that'd be like, well, you shouldn't have done that. And then there'd be people on the other side being like, well, you have nothing to worry about. And I'm like, no, it's so much deeper than that. So I just think reductive things like, for instance, character assassinating someone for coming out as a pro-life game developer ignores the gravity of the actual situation as if it doesn't go both ways. That's the thing that bothers me about the abortion debate. The woman, yes, certainly. But the baby, there are two things on the scale. It's not so cut and dry. And I think that the way you were dealt with was cut and dry. And again, that's just my perspective. I don't anticipate everyone's going to agree with it, and that's totally fine. But the other thing I wanted to remind everyone is just what the laws are in the rest of the world about abortion too, and why I think that, because this leads into the next thing I wanted to ask you. In places like El Salvador, the Philippines, very Catholic places, Egypt, very Muslim place, or a place like Jamaica, totally illegal to have an abortion. Half of Muslim majority countries, totally illegal to have an abortion. In Europe, it's hard to have an abortion after 14 weeks. In the United States, you can get abortions way, 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 way after that. And in the US, we talk about fetal viability, which is dark shit. And that's why I just feel like people need to be staunchly shaken awake and be like, listen, you are hearing a very one-sided part of the argument. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I just think people need to come at it from both ways and realize that it's an unstoppable force and an unmovable object or whatever. It's just, it both have equal weight. Why can't we treat it like that? That's my problem. And that's my problem with why you were treated the way you were. I wanted to ask you about that. How can it be that you say, and actually I have the Gallup polling here, 50% of Americans this year think that abortion should be legal under all circumstances. So that's half of America. The other half of America think that there should be either no abortions or legal under some circumstances. So what, where are those people? In other words, it seemed like your experience made it seem like you were the only one, but it can't be. So where were they? Why didn't they come to your defense? And why do you think it shakes out like that in our industry? It always comes, and I'm sorry, I'm going on and on, but it always comes out to this reductiveness of, well, conservatives aren't creative. Conservatives don't write. Conservatives don't make anything. Of course, liberals are going to be in this industry. Liberals create things. And it's like, that's bullshit. That's bullshit from my own experience. And it's bullshit totally in totality and reality. Why does it go like this when that is true? It just seems, profoundly unjust.
Well, I can tell you why it goes like that, Colin. And this being the Sacred Symbols PlayStation oriented podcast, I'll give you a nugget here. I got lots and lots of messages after what went down with me from high up people in the video games industry saying, I agree with you. I support you. I'm on your side. They're all out there. And I won't say the name, but a VP at Sony messaged me and said, I agree with you. I'm on your side. I support you. But please don't tell anybody that I sent you this message because I don't want to get canceled too.
Right. Exactly.
And that's exactly it.
Yep.
It is, I mentioned social terrorism. And
yeah, so let's get into that. I mean, because that's an interesting term. I want to learn about your thesis in this regard.
And social terrorism is using speech and media to attempt to utilize fear and intimidation to cause people to make rash, unfortunate decisions. Well, let me step that back a bit and explain that a little bit better. It's utilizing media and speech by someone with a political position to try to get change in the direction that they want through fear and intimidation, which ends up causing people to make snap decisions under short circumstances. And it's a horrible thing. It's this thing that, well, you talked about a moment ago that, where were the people on my side? And my 18-year-old daughter, who is even more social media savvy than me, says, "Hey, Dad, you realize your tweet indexed?" I'm like, "What does that mean?" She said, "You got more likes than comments." And yeah, I got 15,000 comments. Let's assume all 15,000 were negative, and I got 18,000 likes. More people liked what I was saying than disliked what I was saying. But in the moment when you're under a social terrorism attack, as I call it, and I say social terrorism, and I created that term. I used to help write scripts for video games, and I realized when you're trying to prove a point, when you want people to remember something, come up with a memorable phrase. Did that in video game scripts, and but I felt cancel culture, it's too weak. It's this milquetoast thing that just feels like, I don't kind of like these people and I want them to go away. No, that's not what's happening. People are activating and taking action that is ruining the lives and livelihoods of people. And I call
for this. This is what I'm saying. For this is what's so outrageous about it. For saying I'm pro-life.
but behind in there's what everyone saw publicly, which is 10, 15,000 people angry saying we're going to boycott your games. And when you're in the middle of that, and this is what they want you to feel like somehow a majority of people are angry and want this person out of the company. When in reality, I believe, and I think polling supports this, that the majority of people, particularly in the United States, they're center left, center right. It's kind of a bell curve. And they're kind of somewhere in the middle, and they feel strongly about some things, but in general, they're kind of in the middle, and they just want to live and be left alone and kind of support different positions. And then you have the fringe elements on the left and right that feel very strongly and take action about things. And in this case, I viewed it as fringe elements of the left that think that people like me should not be able to have a job, and they were going to try to use their voice to make that happen. But beyond the threats of boycotts, which, by the way, did absolutely nothing. Like, our sales went up. Our sales didn't go down. You have every news organization in the Western world writing about, Tripwire CEO did X, Y, and Z. Makers of games 1, 2, 3. Well, most people in the middle, they don't care what I said, what I did. They're like, ooh, that game about sharks, I think I want to play that. So the boycotts did absolutely nothing. But what was really challenging was many of the people within the company, their peers in the games industry were publicly calling them out. How could you possibly work for this vile person, John Gibson? Basically applying pressure through social networks and friend networks to get those people to put pressure on Tripwire to get rid of me. And these people, even if they agreed with my position, and some of them didn't, or they're kind of in the middle, they're like, well, gosh, I don't want to get blackballed in the games industry. If basically there are social and employment benefits to being very left and vocal on social media. Likewise, there are employment and social detriments to being conservative and very vocal on social media. And these people saw their social credibility going down if they did not publicly shout from the rooftops, we need this guy's head on a pike.
Yeah, it's it's hard for me to hear because it reminds me a lot of my situation in my old company and how things that seem normal, or it seems like you're okay until you're not, right? And I always surprise people when I say when I was at IGN, I had a huge Ron Paul 2008 sign on my desk for years. Anyone who went to IGN over those years would have seen it because we had those tall like cubicles. I had it at the very top. You'll find videos of me in Mitt Romney shirts in 2012 on IGN content. That kind of funny. You'll find me talking tons and tons and tons and tons of shit about Hillary Clinton and ultimately voting for Johnson in that election and wearing a Johnson shirt on this stuff. And then it changed just like that. We were never in agreement, me and a lot of other people, but it was copacetic. And something along the way made it not so. And the social terrorism angle really resonates with me because it wasn't the people calling when I left kind of funny because I made a joke about women being loud, which is what like literally the same kind of nonsense, nothing that happened to you. I was met with a lot of the same, oh, you didn't do anything wrong, but don't tell anyone I said anything, including, again, people would be shocked. I would never do this to them. But to tell you who these people were to this day, but it's cowardly. That's why I like having people on this show and our programming, regardless of what they believe or say. I've had a friggin' stone cold plagiarist on the show trying to defend him, trying to defend himself. I've had people cancel trying to defend themselves. I've had people, all sorts of things, like just anything, just say your piece. It doesn't mean I endorse or not endorse what you're saying. But the biggest danger to a person's reputation comes from those around them being silent. And it's a really important lesson. When people were coming out and interpreting me as from that, I'm a Nazi, I'm a bigot, I'm alt-right, all these things. It's not those things per se that hurt the most. It's the people who damn well know it's not true saying nothing. Not to you, but publicly to just say, you know how far it would have gone for a Greg Miller when all that kind of happened to me at Kind of Funny to just come and say, like, we don't agree with each other. We're not friends anymore, but Colin's not a Nazi. Colin's not a bigot. I mean, that's an absurd characterization of him. And that silence makes things seem like they're true. And I felt like the silence around your tweet made it feel like the abuse you experienced was valid when I say damn well to the camera, to everyone out there, it wasn't. It's wrong. And you and I don't agree on this issue. It doesn't matter. It's fucked what happened to you. And I want to say that to you. Okay. It's really fucked. I'm sorry that happened.
I think, certainly, being pro-life is a big part of who I am, and it's an important cause for me. But really, in this instance, what I'm fighting for and why I started to speak out, why I went on Tucker, is I think it's absolutely terrible. And I think we all ought to be, we might disagree on abortion, but we all ought to be able to agree that if you share a viewpoint that is not, hey, go do violent criminal acts, or just morally decried by both the left and the right, we ought to be able to share those opinions with each other publicly and work together. And me keep my job and you keep your job. One of the things that I'm learning to navigate this in my new, because I took about a year off of social media after the whole social terrorism attack went down, really to keep heat off of my company, or not mine as in my only, but the company that I co-owned with 3 other individuals, to keep the heat down while we worked on selling the company. And as I come back, I've tried to engage with people that were on the other side, and I try to have a conversation with them about, well, what do you believe? Because they're like, you're an evil person, or I hate your beliefs. Like, okay, well, what do you hate about my beliefs? And well, X, Y, and Z. And I say, well, don't you agree? He said, because you think you're telling me that I shouldn't be able to have a job because I'm pro-life. That I shouldn't be able to be a CEO of a company in the video games industry and be a successful business person because I have my beliefs. Do you feel the inverse? In other words, should people that believe like me try to destroy your life and your livelihood because you feel differently? And universally, 100% across the board, I've never had anyone answer that question. They're like, they just say, you're an evil woman hater, or you're an evil pro-life person, or whatever. They won't answer that question because the truth of the matter is they don't want themselves, their father, mother, children, cousin, uncle, brother, friends to lose their jobs if they're pro-choice. And that's, let me sum that up by a conversation that I had. One of the things that I did here in Georgia was I worked with the Governor Brian Kemp, on a resolution that he put out, or a decree that was in support of the people of Cuba while they were rioting for free speech. And in the meetings for that, I got to meet an older gentleman that had been tortured in Cuba because he had a library of books that were banned by the communist government. And he was sprayed down with water and put on a metal spring from a bed frame, and then electricity applied to it and shocked. And at one point, the head guard comes in and he says something to that head guard. He says, don't you care about human rights? And the guard says to him, he's like, why should I care? You're there and I'm here. In other words, you're being tortured. I'm the guard. Why should I care?
Yeah, no, they can't imagine the shoe being on the other foot.
And this man that was being tortured, this Cuban gentleman, he told the guard, he said, human rights means that you never end up in the position that I'm in. And the guard actually turned off the shocking machine and walked out of the room. And that's what I feel people should think in this situation. The right to not be canceled by social terrorists because they disagree with your position should exist for everyone. It's so that if the shoe gets on the other foot, if somehow Musk goes out and buys Facebook, and now there's free speech on every social media platform, and now really aggressive people on the right start canceling people on the left and causing them to lose their jobs. this right that I'm fighting for is that we can all have our deeply held beliefs and even talk about them publicly without fear of losing our jobs and our livelihood and our social standing.
Yeah, I think that, to me, I would amend that just slightly to say, I don't think you should lose those things for saying completely reasonable shit like I'm pro-life. You know, like, for instance, we're recording this around the time that all of this is happening with Kanye West, right? Where he's like, he admires Hitler and all this. Like, no, you're done as far as I'm concerned. You don't, it doesn't mean you don't get to live. It doesn't mean I'm going to unbank you. It doesn't mean I'm going to put you in prison for what you said. But from, I'm not going to listen to your music anymore. I just can't separate you anymore. To me, that's the difference, is that there's no delineation between what people are saying and what they intend and the outcome. And again, this anodyne fucking tweet is nothing. It's nothing. It's expressing the viewpoint of half of the world. And that's why I think it's important to use our platform, though it will be, I'm sure people are not going to like this episode. Most of our audience, but I'm sure someone out there is not going to like it. And I'm sure someone out there is going to leave Patreon, and I'm sure someone out there is going to be like, this is too political. But the reality is that I think it's important to give a platform to these kinds of stories, because I really think that regardless of where you stand on the issues, you can see that this is unjust and unfair. And there has to be, to your point, a level of fairness, taking into account a holistic person, not just a drive-by comment that you then, who don't know anything about this person, or don't know anything about the experience, the company, and all this, you use that as leverage to destroy them for sport. And I know that that's what happened because it happened to me. That's why I know it happens. And the way I solidified myself was to do my own thing and became more successful than ever. And that's very lucky, but that doesn't happen for a lot of people. And not to put you out or make you, but not everyone gets to walk away a multimillionaire like you do, right? That's an important part of it, is that I feel like you and I having this conversation hopefully will act as a predicate for others way less fortunate that get wiped out and don't have shit. It's unfair across the board. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
And one of the things I say about that, certainly I hope, and it's part of the reason why I went on Tucker and was just really candid, is I hope people that will see the human cost and what it does to a person. But if you look at me and you're like, okay, but you ended up wealthy because of it, or you ended up with lots of money and you're doing all right. Yeah. Let's assume that that's true. And this is one of the things I've been saying in a lot of my interviews is not everybody gets that. Just like you, I have gotten messaged by so many people that lost everything and they weren't co-owner. One of the things I say is, you can't cancel company ownership. You can cause somebody to lose their job, but somebody's got to buy that part of the company that they owned. But a lot of people are losing their jobs that were just employees. And those people are suffering even worse than I am. So if you don't care about me, care about those people that lose their job. And it's, they might have spent 20 or 30 years developing a craft. Maybe they're a video game programmer. Maybe they're an actor. Maybe they're an insurance salesman, whatever it is they do. But they spent all of this time developing the skill set, and then they can't utilize it anymore. And it's not because, they were shoeing horses and a car got invented. It's because people just thought they've got a different opinion of me. They shouldn't be allowed to have a job. And that's absolutely terrible. And that's terrorism to me.
Yeah. I went through your Tucker interview, by the way, and you said some things that it was heartbreaking. It's like, words can hardly convey, you said, how crushed I was. And you say later, quote, I just want to die. I wanted to die because or you told your wife, I just want to die because I don't want to live in a world that's this unjust. And that you went through 13 months of hell. And in some way, I just wanted to let you know that I can relate to you. Just
Thank you.
People come to me and say, like, well, you walked away and you made this big thing and you're doing better than ever and you're well off and all of that. And I'm like, yes, that's all true. And I'm very grateful for it and thankful for it. I really wouldn't trade any of it for where I became now. I wouldn't want to do it any other way because I like where I am now and everything's great. But it comes at a cost. Money. I always like going back, and I say it all the time, the Ben Affleck quote from Boiler Room about money. Those who say money is the root of all evil never had any. I think that is true. But I also think that people think that it soothes and removes all pain and everything that ever happened to you. And the reality is that no matter how well off I became or how well I did, I'm always going to carry that damage and that experience from me. And it paints my life to this day. Ask anyone in my life, I'm completely isolated myself from almost everyone the last 5 years because I don't trust anybody. And so, yeah, it's like, oh, Colin has money and Colin has this, but it's like, okay, but there's more to it than that. And that's why I also wanted to have you on the show, because I know that, that Embracer came in with THQ Nordic's Vertical and bought the studio, that you're out, that you've gotten this money and you're doing philanthropy and living your best life now, but it doesn't mean that everything's okay either. And maybe it is okay with you. Maybe you feel better about that. And actually, I was really shocked by your conciliatory nature in the interview. You actually tell Tucker at one point, I hope that over time they will grow some empathy. And you're talking about those at the studio, including your co-founders, for what they did. And there can be a relationship there. And I'm like, that's pretty big of you, because I'm kind of like, in your situation, I'd be like, fuck everybody. I mean, at the very least, fuck everybody. And then we can go from there. What is it, that Christian nature in you that makes you want to be conciliatory? Because you are the victim. You realize that, right? You are the victim. So it's up to others to earn your love and respect back.
Colin, it's absolutely my faith. 100%. In the first 24 hours after this happened, yeah, I've never said this publicly, but I was watching social media. I was watching chant channels. I was seeing who was celebrating within the company, who was celebrating me getting pushed out and pushed out of the CEO role. And I was making a list. Like, this is the list of people that someday I'm going to get vengeance on. And, I don't want to present myself. People have this image of people that say they're a Christian, like, you must think you're a saint. I am absolutely not a saint. I have hurt some people in my life. I've done some bad things in my life. And at times, I've absolutely needed grace and forgiveness. And I very much, thinking of that, very much echoed in my ears and in my heart that, hey, these people have done something horrible to me. But just like when I have done bad things, I've needed forgiveness. These people need forgiveness too. And candidly, that hate and that anger was consuming me. And in that first 24 hours, I just decided I can go down one or two paths. I can go scorched earth. I can lawyer up. I can sue the heck out of everyone. I can go start doing, was it libel or slander, whichever one is written.
Written is libel. Slander is said.
Yeah. So I could go slap libel lawsuits on the websites that were saying I don't care about human rights. I could sue. And
you had the money to, and it's important to remember, you had the money to do that.
I totally had the money.
So like, that's an important point, I think, to speak to your character, is that it's not like you had for people to hire a lawyer and go scorched earth is a risk unless you have money, and so I think it's especially cool that you didn't decide to do that. And what did they say about revenge? If you go for the revenge course, you better dig a grave for two or whatever.
Yeah. Another way to look at that is, the anger and bitterness is like taking poison and drinking it yourself and expecting it to cause the other person to die.
Right. Exactly.
And that's how I felt. And this hasn't been a linear path. Certainly over the 13 months up to the company sale, and even a little bit now, I go back and forth. Even up to the few weeks before the company sold, I was like, am I really going to let this go without getting vengeance on the way out? And I kept having to return to my faith and say, no, I've been forgiven. I need to forgive other people as well. Not easy to do. And over the long term, I think it will be good, but life is still hard. Like, yeah, I have money and I had money before. Yeah, right. I've got more money than I did. But that's the thing. The thing about money is not having enough to pay your bills, not having enough to pay for healthcare, whatever. That will certainly cause you to be unhappy. But at some point you cross the threshold where your basic needs are covered and you have some nice things, and getting 10 times as much, 100 times as much, it doesn't make you any happier. Especially if you're a person like I was that didn't start doing what they did for money. me and the other people that I co-founded the company with, we made games for free because we loved it. We just loved the art and the craft of creating video games, and we loved the relationship with our fans and seeing them smile and be happy when we did something that they enjoyed. I did it for free, and then I found a way to make a living doing it. And I liken this to, think about an Olympic athlete that's trained their whole life, and they finally made it to the Olympics, and they're favored to be the person to win the 100-meter in the Olympics. And then the night before they get to run, somebody chops their foot off. And they don't get to run the Olympics. Here I was, the CEO of a company, I'm still pretty young. I'm in my 40s, just gotten the company to the point where we can start making AAA games at budgets that are commensurate with other studios. Got a great team, great artists, great programmers, great designers, incredible staff, just ready to take our shot at going for the gold. And then I'm taking off at the knees.
Yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. It's horrible.
It doesn't matter if you have $10 or $10 million in the bank. That hurts. It's another analogy that to try to help people understand is, let's say you have a life insurance policy on a family member. Maybe it's your kid, maybe it's your wife, and that person dies. And you get $10 million. Are you gonna cry all the way to the bank? Are you just going to cry because you're sad that you lost that person and you don't care that you got the money?
Right. And that a lot of people would say, you can take the money back if I could get this person back.
Yeah. And a company's not a human life, but it's a way to understand the pain that happens when you do this to somebody.
Well, it's a business. It's very serious. I was an executive at my previous business, co-founder of the business. And being kind of having to go and sell your share of it it was great. I mean, it ended up working great. And I suspect it's going to end up working great for you too, to be honest. And I want to get into that. But there is a lot of pain there. And owning and running a business, as I do now as well, it is personal. It's incredibly personal. It's, as I always say, I'm a CEO of a much smaller business, but where we have 10 employees or whatever and freelancers. But it's a lifestyle. And I know that. And so I can totally imagine how that feels. And that's why I feel for you. And I found part of Tripwire's statement when you left to be it was newspeak. Here's what they said, quote, "Our leadership team at Tripwire are deeply sorry and are unified in our commitment to take swift action and to foster a more positive environment," end quote. Yeah, I think you should. I think there's a lot you need to be doing, because someone who founded your company said that he was pro-life. And that was the end. And I think that, especially seeing your partner studios using that as leverage to remove you, I thought and I saw that with the Chivalry dudes, and I guess another, I don't know, contract studio you were working with, releasing their statements and all of that. It felt arm twisty and messed up. I don't understand why people would want to treat someone like that over nothing. And that's what I wanted to kind of ask you to especially because we're going along, and I'm sorry about that, but to wrap things up, are you going to get back in? I mean, I am curious. This was what I found so peculiar about the situation at Tripwire is I would have assumed Tripwire, much like maybe Insomniac in North Carolina or Avalanche Software in Utah and other places, I would imagine that those places attract a more conservative development team. Now, I'm not saying they're all conservative, but a more conservative development team. I also know that Georgia is very good with, especially in movie and TV, I don't know if it happens in games too, although I think it is, where they give money to studios to keep them there, very much like Ontario and other places around the world. I feel like with your capital, you are young. You are too young to be out of the game. Are you going to make another studio and get this going again?
Well, let me share a thought about the other studios. You mentioned the other studios saying things when my tweet came out, and then I'll answer your question.
Yeah, please.
I think there were different ways that different studios handle it. One studio head came out and actually did come out and support and said, "Hey, I don't agree with his position, but I believe he should have a right to say it without this backlash." And that was Ian from the team that made Road Redemption, a game that we worked with. And I'm sorry, he's going to smack me for not remembering which studio it is, but it was co-made by 2 studios, and I don't want to say the wrong studio name. And then there were other partners that were just absolutely silent, and I think that was okay too. They didn't jump into the fray. I think what Torn Banner did, I would have preferred, maybe they don't do that, but I wouldn't lump that into the social terrorism category. It was like, hey, a bomb is blowing up near me, and I'm trying to shield myself from the explosion. It's like, okay, they said, we don't agree with what John Gibson said. Okay, that's your right to say that. You don't agree. What Shipwright did, I would call social terrorism. And it was very much, we are trying to twist the arm of another studio in an effort to get John Gibson ousted. And I think that was just vile, disgusting behavior on their part. I've worked with several of those folks and had a good working relationship with them. And I wouldn't characterize their whole company as being like that, but their leadership, yeah, that was social terrorism. And
it sure seemed, I was just going to say, it seemed Machiavellian as fuck to do to someone.
And candidly, what they were saying wasn't even true. Anybody that's done contracts with anybody knows you can't just decide you don't want to continue with, you have obligations, you have to perform them. You can't just walk away.
That's one of the things I wanted to ask you when I had first emailed you, which is so funny you brought that up, because I was like, that seems like very Pyrrhic at the very least. Like you were going to kill yourself at the very least if you walk away.
No, it was grandstanding, and it was them trying to get social points with their very left oriented peers in the industry. But it wasn't true. They couldn't actually walk away. And they shouldn't have done that. But let me comment on something, Colin. I think it's very important. I haven't really got a chance to speak on this enough in any interviews, and that's an element of what people on the right did, and it goes into what happened to Shipwright, but it also happened to Tripwire. Hundreds, but one of the guys from Shipwright got doxxed, and he was getting so many death threats he had to change his phone number. I'm not sure if they had to hire security or not. Tripwire had to hire security because they were getting hundreds of death threats a day. And I just want to unequivocally condemn, I'm a conservative, but if you think that trying to support someone who's pro-life by making phone calls and saying, you kill babies, so I'm going to kill you, is the right way to support someone that's pro-life? No, I don't need that kind of support. I condemn that unequivocally. And the people that did that to Tripwire, they're also social terrorists. It's not just on the left. It can also happen on the right.
Certainly. No doubt.
And I think that's reprehensible. And I'm sorry that it happened to Tripwire, and I'm sorry that happened to the people at Shipwright as well.
I just, I like your conciliatory nature. I think it's noticeable. I feel like there's something about, I just want people to think about, we're focused on pro-life, but it's almost just, it's not even relevant what it is. The point is that it would be equivalent to someone saying, I believe trans men are men. Like that's kind of the similar thing where it's a political statement and a mainstream political statement. You might not agree with it. I don't agree with that statement either, but it's like, okay, what? So you said it, and then we're going to just go to war. And one of the things that you said that really sticks with me is we're both conservatives. So I am very connected and well connected with, the people in our sphere. And what I notice is that they are not getting pushed around anymore. And I fear the eye for the eye escalation where you're seeing it straight up. I won't name any names. I don't want, but like a lot of commentators are like, no, like we're coming for you now. And this is what I have always feared for a long time too, because when I say I'm right wing, I think that means I believe in peace, right? Peace and prosperity, no war, none of it. And so I just want people to kind of treat each other's words as that, and then you can have a different barometer on what those words mean. But we have to remind everyone that this all goes back to something so anodyne and mainstream, and it's truly the epitome of unjust. It just is. And again, I'm sorry, like I just you won't find. I relate to you, and I didn't really realize how much that was actually true. But I wanted to pinch you one more time, or press you, not pinch you, press you one more time on, will we get something new? I mean, I just feel like you have the means and mode to do it. So, and I think you could also double down, like Warhorse Studios, which was also bought by Deep Silver, I guess, which is now with Embracer Group. That they kind of came after that guy for that studio during the Gamergate era, and he just completely doubled down. And then that game sold millions of copies, and he's massively rich, and they're making a sequel and all of these kinds of things. I think, is there a part of you that wants to just own it and just let's just be who you are and go on and do something new?
So first off, I mentioned this a little bit, and I'm not trying to get sympathy, really. I just want people to understand this is a traumatizing experience. When I say 13 months of hell, it's not hyperbole. I went from not knowing, months and months and months of not knowing if I was even going to get a paycheck, not knowing if we were going to be able to sell the company, not knowing if I was going to be able to get separate, just this uncertainty about what the next part of my life was going to be able to be. Finally have some certainty. The sale is over. I moved on. The money's in the bank. So now I don't want to make any snap decisions. My plan has always been, and I'm about a month and a half into it, maybe 2 months, take 6 months off, recover, spend some time with my family, and then reevaluate, because I was so stinging from coming out of the games industry and what happened to me that I just didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to play video games. I didn't want to read game news or anything. But I have a feeling that over time, as that wound heals, I might want to get back into it. I certainly have the capability financially. I could start a publisher tomorrow and fund games at a higher level than my previous company did. And
do it. We're excited. Yeah, I know you have to take the time off, but I'm excited that you're at least planting a seed to hopefully have a redemption arc.
I have the skill set. I have, a skill set that I developed with publishing at Tripwire and developing. I mean, I don't know if I get back into programming. I did program most of our early games, did AI and the gameplay and the networking and what that, but doing publishing is probably what I would do. And I worry, Colin, that there's so many people that are against me in the press and the industry publicly that might be very, very difficult. I worry about how that might play out with partners if I'm going to publish somebody's game. I don't want some guy that's pissed off at me at Kotaku to write terrible things about somebody's game that I publish just because I'm associated with it. I don't want PC Gamer to write and imply that somebody's a racist because they're associated with me. And that's one of the things I just want to call out. I mentioned it in my tweets, but you highlighted earlier is I went on Tucker. Nobody was covering the story. It's like I'm on the second biggest television show on cable. And when was the last time a video game developer was on the second biggest show on cable? I don't know, Gamergate. And nobody was covering it. And finally, PC Gamer did cover it. And I thought the article was pretty decent. It was fairly balanced, a little left, but somewhat balanced. And then in the end, the person writing the article just says, this liberal journalist said, as reported by this other liberal news source, that this third liberal news source says that Tucker Carlson is the most racist show on television.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how. I don't want to make this all about Tucker Carlson, but I actually watch Tucker Carlson fairly often. Sometimes I disagree with him. Sometimes I agree with him. But what I respect is that he really is the only person that seems to have a spectrum of guests that cover all sorts of different things, tell different stories, and disagree with each other. I think it's weird. Isn't it weird that the only place you'll find anti-war coverage is on Fox News? That's strange. Times have changed.
I don't agree. I agree with some of what Tucker Carlson says, and I had to agree. disagree with some of what he says. But one, to make unproven claim, just citing your source as being the opinion of a third or fourth party journalist is this person's racist. Okay, that's not proof. Two, I could go on CNN, I could go on whatever. That doesn't mean if I went on the television show that I agree with the politics of the person that interviewed me. And it was a veiled attempt to say, well, we're reporting this story, but also the first place John Gibson went was to talk to a racist, which is totally not true and just not journalism.
No, and again, Tucker Carlson is just one of the few people in that mainstream media space that actually tells stories. People might not like to hear that, but it is true. I mean, I dare you to watch. Just if you want to see for yourself, just watch Tucker Carlson for a week. Just not even the show, but just his monologues. Then go watch MSNBC and just see what you think about what the balance is actually there. But regardless, it doesn't matter how you feel about Tucker Carlson because people are supposed to be more objective about this. This is what I have to say to you about this, though, is you don't have to worry about them. They have no power anymore. Like the games media really, truly doesn't have power anymore. I don't know how many more ways I can possibly put this out there. It just doesn't matter. Like there are YouTube channels of dudes in their bedroom that get more views on YouTube than IGN. There are dudes that this is the biggest PlayStation podcast in the world out of my house in Virginia,
which is awesome.
Thank you so much. So thank you for that. So what I'm saying is, I don't know that you take your time, figure your things out. Maybe you'll find another passion project, and you certainly don't have to work if you don't want to. But don't let them win by virtue of just scaring you away. That's almost like that's social terrorism too, the sequel. And they're diminishing power. Here, let me tell you this. Let me put it this way. You said something very magnanimous before, which was that you were basically saying you don't want to deal with the schadenfreude of keeping track of who said what and I'm different. Like, I don't act on it. I don't say anything to anyone, but I know exactly who said what about me and what. And when they fall off, and they all have been, and they all just get off the musical chairs in games media diminishes and there are fewer and fewer chairs, I remember and I notice, and inside I smile about it and I have a good laugh and no one knows about it. And you get a little bit of both. So you don't have to be an asshole about it, but you can still have the human emotion of having won when someone had gotten one over on you. And I hope that you don't let them and that prospect scare you away, because I really don't feel like Kotaku has no power. Polygon has no power. These sites, IGN is just a click farm. And I say that as someone who worked there for 14 years, 12 years, actually. So, and I loved it, but it's just different. So my friend, don't worry too much about that. You need to find your kin in the podcast space, in the YouTube space, in the Twitch space. And if you're not familiar with Daniel Varva and the experience with Warhorse Studios and their game Kingdom Come Deliverance, read about it, because he was considered a quote unquote pro Gamergate. And we're not talking about Gamergate, and I was not pro Gamergate, but he was someone that was affiliated with that, and their game ended up killing, and he still owns that studio, and they sold it to THQ, and they're still making their sequel and all of that. I say double down on who you are. Find your people and make yourself uncancelable. You're already uncancelable financially, so now you just need to inoculate yourself by finding the right partners and putting out from day one, this is who I am. You know who I am. We're going to make this game together, whatever the case might be, and then see where the cards fall. But don't worry about the press. It's not 1980, so don't worry about it. That's my take.
Appreciate. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. I think fear is probably not the right word, because candidly, and I don't say this in a cocky way, but I'm really not scared of anything, maybe other than my family suffering. You talked a little bit earlier about my life, and I don't want to. We've gone long, and I don't want to dive into it too much. But I had a horrible life growing up. I'm being treated for PTSD for the experiences that I went through growing up, the abuse that I got. I had one counselor that was in his 70s tell me I've got the worst childhood he's ever heard of. I had, I was held hostage at gunpoint. I was abused, had family members murdered. They were absolutely horrible. That was absolutely horrible. But part of the challenges of growing up that way, it's left me, really without fear. Sometimes maybe a little too, maybe I should have a little more fear at times, honestly. But it's more about calculating, doing the calculus.
Sure, I totally understand
Is
that.
this possible? Will all of the game platforms sell the games that I go to publish, even if the press don't write about them? Will the people that have publicly come out the game platforms have come out on the other side of the issue that I got canceled for? Are they going to accept people with a viewpoint different than theirs? And do I want to take partners? Because I'm fearless, but am I going to find other developers that are making great games that need publishing and funding that are going to be fearless next to me? Maybe. But really, who knows? Maybe I say this semi-jokingly, but I've thought about starting a small production car company because I have a huge passion for cars. I have friends in politics saying that I need to run for office. And I give that a little bit of thought, but I don't know if I hate dealing with intercompany politics, am I going to want to do with national politics?
Especially in Georgia, it's just so confusing right now.
Yeah, but certainly I don't view myself as being done in. This won't be the last that you'll hear of John Gibson. I will succeed at something in the future. I don't know if it's going to be games, but you're going to hear about me.
I imagine that's true. And you have, I mean, for what it's worth, in our little small corner of the internet and our micro community, you have a friend with us. You can always come talk to us and tell us what you're doing. We would love to have you back to talk strictly about games when that time comes. But in the meantime, I want to thank you for kind of sitting here and telling your story. And hopefully it shows the audience yet again, as they see all these guests that I brought on over the years, that reasonable minds can differ, as lame as that is. You and I fundamentally disagree about the core thing you were tweeting about, and I would defend you to the very end on it. It's another example of ridiculousness, and it happens so often that I think people are callous in moving on so quickly and not realizing the personal destruction that's left in the wake, because it's always on to the next thing and always on to the next thing. And we all know that in the games industry. That's just the way it is everywhere, but it's especially like that in our games industry. And so it's good to kind of put on the record what actually happened. And we were all going to wish you the best. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
So Ken, and I always end every episode of Sacred Symbols Plus by asking if we have a guest on, is there anywhere people can find you, or do you want to interact with people on social media, or you just kind of prefer to be on your
Absolutely. At Ram Yeager on Twitter, RAMMJAEGER.
Cool. And I actually was looking at your Twitter account in preparation. I was seeing that you were tweeting about, getting into tweeting about politics. You just saw Herschel Walker, which I thought was interesting. He's an interesting cat. I want to see how that all plays out with him.
Find out tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And when
this is in Arizona, so we'll find out tomorrow.
Right. This one. Exactly. That was so. Oh my goodness. So I thought that was interesting, and I just liked it because it was cool to just see you being yourself. I also saw a picture you shared of you in Zambia doing some work. So again, this is we're in the words not actions phase of humanity apparently, but this is an actions not words picture, and I like that. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, thank you. That's a organization called WIPHAN, WIPHAN, WIPHAN.org, and they provide free education to young orphans in Zambia, and also job skills training for widows because of the AIDS epidemic there. There are a lot of orphans, single and double orphans that have lost one or both parents, and there's a lot of widows. So, and yeah, they're a charity they support, but I also physically go there and do things, take action and don't just send money around.
Yeah, well, that's more than I guarantee you 99.9% of your detractors have ever done in their lives to help someone.
That title on there about being a philanthropist, it's not just lip service. It's a core part of who I am because I care about people. And I grew up poor and in the worst of circumstances, and now now that I'm no longer poor, I want to help the people that are growing up like I did.
That's really nice of you. It's funny, man. Like I'm not anywhere on your financial level, but the better I've done in my life, I have to say, the more, and this is strange for people to hear, but the more liberal I've become, because I guess I'm less afraid of not having anything. And as I've done better and better and secured my life more and more, I have started to, it wasn't that I was interested in pulling the ladder up. It's just that I wasn't tending to the ladder at all. And I have to tend to the ladder more. And so I've become much more cognizant of that. This Christmas season, for instance, we're giving a bunch of gifts away to various families and all that. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I feel like people need to take more action in helping those around them. And so I really love that spirit. And again, you're very welcome with us anytime, John. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Sacred Symbols, Last Stand, etc. We could not do it without you. Hope you enjoyed our episode, and we'll see you next time for more. Until then, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.